Hey, everybody. Welcome to another exciting episode of the Two Half Squads. I'm Jeff,
I'm Dave.
and we have three very, very, very important guests with us. And we're very happy to have Dan Dolan. Nadir, how's your last name pronounced, Nadir?
Elfarra.
Elfarra. Seems easy enough. And Carl Nogueira, glad you guys could join us. Glad
Nice
you.
to be here.
So, Nadir was about to tell us a story, an interesting story.
How things.
Yeah, I think this was 2013, and Dan contacted me saying, "Hey, do you still make maps for ASL?" Because I had done some very long time ago, before MMP took over with Hasbro. So he knew about from that, and he had an 8.5 by 11 hand-drawn map of what he thought Dinant looked like, and said, "Can you turn this into something I can do play tests with?" And of course, the answer to that was sure, I can do that. But in the course of doing that, of course, with a background in architecture, I was I couldn't do it just from his drawing, and I had to actually look at, okay, what does Dinant look like today? How is it laid out today? What did it look like in 1940? What kind of information can I get from 1940?
I get a lot of that.
And so it changed quite a bit from turn his drawing into a map to create a drawing of Dinant. And so I worked up something that was suitable for playtesting, and then it was away to the races with Dan, and then later with Carl on the campaign game using that playtest map. And then the curveball that sort of came later was when MMP got involved. They wanted us, as part of the design package, to provide the finished map artwork, which is not normally how they do things. And so at that point, the map went through a really significant upgrade from what was suitable for playtesting to something that would be, visually appealing for players, and as historically accurate as I could make it, right down to exactly what the roof eaves looked like on individual buildings.
And so, how did
That
you
was
did you have a time machine, or did you go to France or anything like that?
No, I wish I could have gone Belgium, actually, but yeah, the starting point, of course, is modern day, and you have Google Street View and things like that you can use, which you can get a pretty good sense of whether I'm looking at a really modern building or a really old building just from that. But then there are other sources of information, whether they be period photographs, photographs during the occupation, literally postcards from the 20s and 30s before the war. All these communities had their tourism boards, if you will, and they would make postcards of their church or their bridge or their this or their that. And you can find a lot of information. Say again, Dan?
Pictures of plazas and things like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Find out open ground, and
the fortress and the cathedral, for example, are prominently in a lot of photographs from older times. But again, looking in the background of those photos, you can see what the buildings look like,
right.
Other buildings,
Yeah.
And so it's just layering all that information on top of each other until you pin down that, at 1940, this is what all that, must have looked like.
Yeah, well, you came up with the road tunnel. That was like amazing. You couldn't even see that except for that little one picture you took from up.
Yeah, I remember actually when I was doing a bunch of my research to put the map together. I was looking at what I could see in plan view, straight top down. And I was thinking, well, gosh, it's really weird that they have this, railroad line, but then there's a road on either side of it. But then, and it wasn't until I was actually reading something that described Rommel's actions. And lo and behold, there are these tunnels under not the tunnel he's talking about at the, closer to the main bridge, but over by Bouvenet, where those three passageways are under the railroad. And I remember almost shouting with joy that I had figured it out, that I had guessed right on how that must lay out. And it's just part of the fun of doing the map is making it accurate, right? That's the whole point of the HASL, is that I'm fighting on the same ground, looking at the same problem that they fought and that they faced.
Oh, you're gonna have to be you gotta be told in here that you did a job on this map that was incredible. I mean, it was just watching the work over like 8 years on this thing.
Yeah,
It was
it took a
just,
long
I
time,
mean,
but
if
it
you
was worth
saw
it.
my first draft, people, you'd understand what I had to go through. Like,
Yeah.
I mean,
So-
it was
so-
like I
Yeah,
have a
so once
copy
they
of
were
that. I
equipped,
can post it. I'll send it to you. You can use it
That
to,
would be
to
fantastic.
write up for this show. I mean, it's my first map of this is like comical. It's like I drew it with like a Sharpie markers one afternoon on the top of a wet book.
You're not an artist. You're an idea guy.
yes,
No,
exactly.
it was
And he had a great
but I
idea.
mean, he did like a great job. He come back. It's not quite the way he tells it that like I just called him out of nowhere. I think I had seen him at Winter Offensive, where he had seen a copy of the map that I had taken from the map that I drew that he used for the initial map. He came back with a map that showed terrain in ASL style within like 20 minutes. And it was just, it blew the map that I was using for the past 8.5 years off the table. You know, just like, what the hell is this? You know, it was one of the most incredible moments of ASL that I've had in my life when I saw that map. Like, now just put it out. And this was just showing the roads and the hills. That's all it had on it. And it was like, I was like, wow. You know, it's going to be really interesting when he gets done doing it. You know, and I was right. I mean, he did a spectacular job.
And it's a pretty good
Glad you
size
think so.
map. So
Mhm, mhm.
is that the biggest
Yeah,
map you've done?
it's a big map.
Yeah.
Yeah, for ASL, I think that's the biggest one I've done for ASL. I looked at a project a long time ago that was 3 maps wide, but ended up scaling that one back anyway. For other game systems for other companies, I've done larger stuff, but yeah, that was probably the biggest. Yeah, I was trying to find and see if I still had a copy of Dan's map, but I can't locate it. So
You
I'll
couldn't
have to.
get your background. For those watching on YouTube, I put up a photo. I've been looking at a lot of these and rereading all the rules. And yeah, it's totally cool. I mean, this chapel thing and the forts up
Mhm.
on this hilltop,
Mhm,
with
mhm.
the wall around it, and what a great map.
It's an incredible place to be and see. You know, when you see it, it was like I got there and I could walk around the city with this map. You know, I showed it to the innkeeper when we first came in. My wife asked, you know, the guy asked us what we were doing in Dinant. And my wife just started laughing and said, "You tell him," you know. I said, "I'm here to study, you know, Rommel's Crossing." He goes, "Oh my God." He went running upstairs. He came back down with this giant book that his father, who had owned the restaurant before him, had made in 1940 when Rommel came through the town. You know, he stayed at the inn.
Wow.
You know, the same, and it was like the guy was like, he had this book that his father, clippings. He had a picture. It was weird. It was the German photographer took it from the East Bank, and he was taking a picture of this guy towing a raft, towing like a 37 millimeter gun or something. And in the background is the hotel with the name written on the roof and the shingles. They still had it. And on the steps of the hotel is this other guy taking a picture of the German.
Oh.
So they both had taken a picture at this exact moment of each other with this little raft in a way. You know, that was his father. And Rommel got wounded and they brought him back there to sew him up. So it was really an interesting place. I mean, the whole town is like, you know, things happened all over it. You know, it made it interesting to design, but it was a nightmare for Nat having to do the map. Because we kept coming to him every year. You think they could see half a hex further on that? You know, he just did everything now. It was incredible.
How did you
Yeah,
pick particular engagement for the how did the idea come to you for this historical module?
Dave Gavitri,
Oh,
the ASL mailing list one night at like 3:00 in the morning. And we were talking about we were talking about French tanks and how that the tank commander would sit outside of the armor. I couldn't grasp this concept that you would have a tank and then sit outside of it, on the back of the turret, no less, with your head sticking up. And we were talking back and forth, and with the mailing list, you have to type the message and wait like 5 minutes for it to come back, with the reply. It's like talking to a spaceship on the way to Mars. And he kept saying, this is so you can see better. I said, see better than the bullet that takes his head off. And we went, he says, he's insulting the French. You should try to design a scenario for the French. I said, I can design a scenario for the French. He said, okay, let me see the scenario. So I said, all right. I went home and I'm like, what the hell am I going to do? So I started looking. One of the first things you read is Rommel with the 7th Panzer crossing the Meuse, they broke through. All right, so I said, let me look this up, and that started the whole thing.
Wow.
From that came Dinant. I just met these people along the way that were like spectacular at what they did. Carl was freaking put the campaign game together and tightened the rules up to the point where they became, my 2.5 pages became like the ASL rules for Dinant, you see.
Carl he did a great job turning real engineering, combat engineering, the bridging operation into ASL, which is quite an achievement.
Yeah, and reading those rules again in preparation, it didn't seem all that complicated to me.
It's
a measure of his skill.
And it's not that complicated. That's the thing that's like the beauty of it. It's complex, but it's not complicated.
The idea was to try to take existing rules and then modify them instead of doing something whole cloth new. You get something whole cloth new, you got to learn all 5 paragraphs or 10 paragraphs or whatever it is. But if you're saying, okay, how do these guys get the stuff to the riverbed? Well, they haul it there. Okay, so portage points, now it's too big for portage points. So what else we got in the system that pushes things? Pushing guns. There we go. We'll just kind of work off of that. All right, now how about putting a bridge together or a ferry, for crying out loud? When's that ever gotten done? Right.
Carrying things to the...
Wait a minute, we can reverse engineer it. Clearance, except this time we're not clearing, we're adding things on. All right, we'll use clearance. There we go. And so by using rules that already exist and just modifying them, it takes something that could be real complex and hopefully anyway makes it a little easier. I don't know if it's always successful because I always get emails. God, this is so fucking complicated. No, guys, it's not that bad, really. It's just like, you know how to do clearance, don't you? What? No. So then you gotta work with that. But as long as you're using existing rules and modifying them, I think it makes complex ideas easier. And you see a lot of that in the system. A lot of people's ideas use that, It's certainly not the first time it's been done. It's just the first time it's been applied to this, I guess.
I think it's really important to understand the value of being able to, again, coming back to it from the military history perspective, huge aspects of warfare that we study in our scenarios doesn't happen unless people learn to cross obstacles like that river. And so giving the players the opportunity to do that and understand the difficulty, particularly of doing it under fire, I think is a real great feature of this game. And it couldn't have happened without Carl's rules.
Yeah, no, it was.
The part I get is watching people play with their assault engineers. Sorry, Dan, but assault engineers, what you usually do with assault engineers, up to the front. In this here, it's like, oh, you go to the front with them, you can row across. Nobody's coming across on a bridge though, because there's nobody to build the bridge now, because all your assault engineers are up front. So that's part of the whole campaign part of it anyway, is figuring out how many stay behind to build the bridges and the ferries, and how many go forward to man the flamethrowers and the DCs. And if you get the calculation wrong, it could be an issue.
Yeah, it did strike me that they're the assault engineers doing the work in the back, and then because the clearance, I got to roll less than 2 on 2 dice, but I haven't played it yet to see how quickly I could build a bridge, but you guys are saying it happens, right?
Oh yeah,
it just happens. You can do it. You have to concentrate on it. You have to plan your route for the bridge to get down to the river. There's a lot of traffic.
And then the bridge goes straight across, right? Or you pick a hex row. I can't show it here.
Yeah, down the
You
hex
actually
grain, not a
Grain.
notch.
You pick the thing up and you carry it to the where it is water and you drop it. Basically what you do, and then these guys attach it and off you go, but it's getting it down there that makes it interesting, because you got guys trying to shoot it. It's pretty easy to kill a truck.
Yes.
It's like, you don't really want it to be seen by anything, and it's a big ass target. Yeah, especially carrying like a movie screen around on the back of it,
Yes. And then getting the pulley across. Now that you had to have one guy on both sides to
Right.
set
Yeah.
that up, right? You want to tell us how that kind of works? And
Sure. The way that works basically is it's a two-part project. One, you have to get somebody on both sides, as you were saying. They have to both be assault engineers. And you also need to have a constructed ferry. So first you build the ferry, and then you got to say to yourself, all right, how are things going? Am I so desperate that I don't care about the pulley? I'm just going to, land these guys on the ferry, take them off and put them over there. Or do I want the speed that the pulley is going to give me over time? Am I willing to put the time in right now to gain on the back end to make this thing go back and forth faster? And that's why you do the pulleys. And so, that's the first decision. Then the next decision point is, okay, how am I going to go about this? Because I need this to be constructed on both sides of the river. And again, it goes down a hex grain. All this goes down a hex grain. There's no, thank God, alternate grains, bridges.
yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That would have been more than I ever would have wanted to do. But yeah, so basically that's how the pulley works. I did something for dispatch. It's called Decoding Dinant, which actually addresses all the different engineering rules and the rationale behind it. And well prepared here. Yeah, I wonder what issue that was. It was a recent one, I can tell you that.
49 or something.
Might have been. It's again, as I believe it was either Jeff or Dave. I think it was Dave was saying, it's really not that complex. People hear, oh my God, I'm going to be building pontoon bridges. Oh geez, what's got rules for socket wrenches? No, it's not that bad. It's fairly straightfortard actually. But the
they're
tough part
IIFT
is
socket wrenches.
Straightforward.
Oh, somebody had to bring it up, An IFT socket wrench man myself. Sorry, keep that IIFT stuff out of here. But yeah, I mean, it's the trick to it isn't really so much the rules as coordinating everything. And that's actually been one of the more rewarding things with the CG is I get emails from people who are playing the CG. And I'll get an email from the French player. And I'll get an email from the German player. And they're both saying the same thing. How the hell am I supposed to win this? This thing looks so horribly unbalanced. And I sit back and smile and say, oh, good, they're both complaining. This is perfect.
Yeah.
I couldn't have asked for a better result. Beautiful. Yeah. But both sides have a lot of considerations. They really do. And that's one of them is do I want to trade speed for time? I can get this across on a ferry right now, but I can get 3 times. I actually do that calculus in the article. Over the course of the campaign, I can get 3 times as much across if I take the time now to build the pulley. But how do I feel about building that pulley? Are both guys safe? Am I actually going to get this complete, or am I just going to waste 3 turns that I could send somebody across on the ferry? Or do I have this under control? And will I therefore benefit from it down the road? It's not your average CG in that usually the defender has to plan meticulously for the setup. In most CGs I've played, and I've played quite a few of them. The attacker is kind of more an opportunistic player role. With this, you actually have to plan both sides pretty carefully. So you have to plan the attacker just as carefully as you would the defender. And that's, in my experience anyway, fairly rare.
Yeah, historically, the Germans didn't plan the first crossing, which was further upriver, and they got their nose bloodied. And Dinant was the second try. And part of, we've just had our local ASL tournament, and there was a group playing Dinant, and they were doing day 1. And it was bloody for the Germans. A lot of boats getting sunk, a lot of guys getting shot up. And I asked the question, I said, did anybody, start lighting buildings on fire? And the reason I asked that question is not because that's some great ASL. That's exactly what Rommel did. He needed the smoke to cover the operation to build the pulley exactly as Carl described. And because they didn't have it deliverable by indirect fire, the option was start lighting buildings on fire to create a smoke screen. And when you see players facing the exact same historical problems that the actual people did, you know that the product has delivered the experience you were after. And I think that Carl and Dan did that in spades.
Excellent. Yeah.
It's a nice background you got there.
Yeah, isn't it though? It does. It shows you the tower here too.
Yeah.
The steeple with the red cross going up to be the higher steeple.
Yeah.
Just excellent.
It's a pretty awe-inspiring place when you stand down there and look up at it. You know, it's like my wife to have a stairway that goes up the side, but it's the most rickety thing you've ever seen. It's like they have a sign at the bottom in like 4 languages. Don't lean on the railing. The railing will break. You will fall to your death. Don't lean on the railing.
Wow.
You have to go up these stairs that are literally about that wide. You know, you don't stand like broad-shouldered across it. You're sort of slithering along it, either front end or front back. But it's like you go up this side of this hill and you got to try to like turn. And it's like people that have like a fear of upper levels, it's a scary place, you know. It's like
You can actually see that on the map behind you there. If on the game map, it's there in the where the fortress is in the lower right hand side. You can see where the path crosses the cliffside. That's that stairway that he's talking about behind the church there.
Oh,
I see.
yeah, where it touches the building.
Is that TT-44?
Yeah, so TT-44 is where it starts, and then it ends up at the fortress up at the top.
Wow.
Oh, yeah. That's what the red.
VV-44 is the terminal spot.
Not the red stuff, below that. In UU, what is that? UU-43? UU-44.
Oh, yeah.
I can't see it. It's a little blurry.
Yeah, UU-40.
You can see where the path starts, and where it zigzags up is where it actually, what Dan's talking about.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. What else is interesting about this fantastic game?
Oh, well, it's, you know, it's a product of a lot of people doing really good work on it. I mean, every step along the way, from when I handed over the scrap of paper to Nadir, and it just took off from there. You know, I mean, without Nadir's map, this would have never been doable. You know, I mean, I showed it to Brian Youst for 6 years down at Winter Offensive, and they just walked past me every year. And I was out in the hallway. They wouldn't even let me play it in the room. The map was so hideous. But, you know, we kept plugging away, trying. And one day Nadir came by and he said, you know, oh, if you ever want me to draw a map, I like to draw maps. They've done a couple, you know. I said, oh, yeah, I've seen, you know. And for 5 years, I didn't even think of it, you know. Then he saw me again that I had played it down there. I think it was in like 2000. And Nadir, when did we first start together? 2010, somewhere out there?
I think the email that I have was 2013.
2013. Okay, so it was, you know, we started at that point. I asked him, you know, you still do maps? And he said, oh, yeah. I don't think he knew what he was getting into at that point. It was like, we were talking at nights on the phone about the way the river curved. You know, you can see, you know, in drawing those, the 3 railroad bridge tunnels that go through the embankment. It's just like, you know, drawing them and getting the lines of sight down to play the scenario for there. It's like, it's interesting. It was a trip watching Nadir do the map. Like he'd do these buildings and like he'd come back, the roof of the building would be changed. You know, you'd look at it like it was just like, and then you'd look at an aerial photograph and the shingles were the same way. You know, it was weird. It was strange seeing it just become alive. You know, and it was.
The goal there, of course, is that if you create the terrain correctly, then it'll mirror the historical event. You know, the same pieces of terrain will be important. And that's what you want to give the player. You want to give that player that same sense where he and Rommel could conceivably sit there and go, yeah, if I had just taken that building the day before, it would have made all the difference. You want the player to have that experience. You want them to be reading something and go, you know, I had that same that same feeling when I tried to cross. That's success.
Yeah, it was. Carl, how about that Rommel guy? Huh? Was that worth putting him in?
Yeah, now that really struck me too, is there's an individual counter for Rommel. Now, and Dan, you said he did get wounded historically?
Yeah, he did. On the
here.
second day, when he sent von Bismarck and a group of guys from the recon platoon up through the southern entranceway, and they got through to Anhay, the next town over, where the French had a regimental headquarters set up. And he ran into this, and he stopped outside the town, and he radioed back, we're delayed at Anhay. And in German, it's Gefischgefunden or Gefischgefahrten, and they transcribed it and told Rommel that von Bismarck was surrounded at Anhay. So Rommel grabbed everything he had on the beachhead and said, let's go to Anhay. We got to rescue von Bismarck. And he came screaming down the road with like 13 tanks. And he was in it. He jumped into a Panzer III. And as he came over the crest of the hill, looking down into Anhay, he got hit by an anti-tank run. And his driver drove off the road, and Rommel split his face open. So he hit his head on the ring of the cupola, and he came back to the hotel that I stayed at, the Hotel Beauvignon. And it was like he gave the innkeeper, he signed a letter telling German troops to leave this guy alone. He was a good, friend to the German people, for taking care of Rommel that night when he came back. They kept him there. They sewed his face up, and he spent the night in this hotel. And the next morning, the guy had breakfast laid out for him, and he was happy. He did German thing and left. So he gave the guy a letter, and it was interesting. This guy was like he was a one-man inn. He did everything at the inn. He cooked the food, he served the food, he made the beds, he did everything. He was by himself. Did 6 beds, and and he was renovating the dining room. It's like, but I showed him the map of the place, and he took it down to the town council meeting that night and showed it to the mayor and the people. Like, look at these people are doing. They're playing this game, and it was. He said, when the thing got done, we should come back over there, and they would have like a day. If anybody wants to go over there, make the Dinant day. I was thinking of going over to one of these years on those 2 days and spend the weekend there or whatever.
That'd be cool.
Would be
That'd
very
be great.
Cool. Now, with Rommel being have you guys played games in him where he gets killed?
Oh yeah, it's a bummer. It really sucks when Rommel gets killed,
because you treat him as a kind of like as a commissar, right?
No, Rommel can bolster the morale of people 2 hexes away.
Yeah, he's got the range thing.
He helps them aid building with laying the ferries down or the pulleys. Rommel gives them a pat on the butt and says, "Okay, we'll get a pulley done." And it's like he's all over the place. But you got to try to keep him away from the enemy. Try to kill him, because you lose ELR and your people go to hell.
You lose
Carl did that
too.
Carl did that.
Oh yeah, he cost points. Huh?
Was that a hard decision to put him in the game? Because that is pretty unusual
No,
for ASL.
No, he was project manager with combat boots. Really, was what he was. He was the impetus that kept things going.
Yeah,
he got there when he got there first arrived on the scene. The Germans had tried to cross the river before, and they had been bloodily repulsed. They were just like laying in the buildings back on their side of the river, shooting across every now and then with a rifle held up over their heads. And he said, "What's going on here?" The colonel said, "Oh, we got to have to get something down here. We need smoke." And he says, "What are those 60 men doing across the river there?" He said, "Well, they're in those buildings there, hanging on by the teeth." He says, "Well, have them set the buildings on fire. That'll give us smoke." So the guy says, where will they go if they set their buildings on fire? You just climb the cliffs and get up there. They're killing us from up there. So he went across in one of the first boats that crossed the river. And he spent the afternoon like working on the far side of the river, getting things moving off of the beachhead, I guess you could call it.
Yeah.
He had a pretty full day. He actually got strafed by a friendly aircraft almost as soon as he arrived with his chief adjutant. So he was almost killed by a German plane when he first got there. He was almost killed by the French the second day. He actually got wounded the second day. And yeah, he was all over the place. He really was, you know. So you almost had to represent him. You had to represent him, but you didn't want him sitting there in a machine gun nest saying, "Okay, pop those guys, pop those guys."
Yeah,
That wasn't his
right.
role. He was at a higher level than that. He wasn't getting his hands dirty. He was trying to keep the whole operation going. And in that role, he was very successful.
Yeah, I think that the decision that they made to not represent him the way he had been in past scenarios as just a straight 10-3 leader was a great one, because it really changes how you use him in the game. And if he had been a 10-3 leader, the sort of knee-jerk reaction, I think that the game would have suffered for it.
The Death Star syndrome, it was the thing I was looking to avoid. You know, we didn't want to have that
Right.
German, 3 heavy machine guns, or you break it down to half spots and you got like a dozen things coming at you. You know, it's like, it was just, I didn't want to have him depicted like that. I wanted him to be the one behind the scenes. You know, to get those guys moving over there, get these guys going up here. And it worked out well because it was just so simple to do. You know, all he has to do is not have the ability to direct fire. And it makes him a whole different kind of character. You know, it's like, I think they should do Corman the same way. You know, they would give them another avenue to put victory points into a scenario that would make it interesting. You know, you have to rescue people that are on stretchers, litter bearers, you know, and Corman that can fix people up and keep them alive for a certain number of turns. You know, there's different ways to represent them, but these guys should be out there. You know, the individual at this level, the individual makes a huge difference. You know, I mean, we did a scenario about a lieutenant in the Belgian army that ran out and blew a bridge up. You know, he was behind the gas station when we found him.
Oh.
There was
a monument to him, to be clear.
Yeah.
There was at least one, I think, confirmed instance where German soldiers were dressed as Americans and trying to get behind American lines. And I don't know if they actually did that, but did you have any?
Yeah.
In Belgium.
Yeah. Did you have any
Yeah.
ideas to slip that into the game somehow?
Yeah, we put that in as the scenario, the last scenario. It's called The Almost Men. And it's about the 2nd Panzer Division. The 3 campaigns that they were in, the first one was 1940, and they almost got to the English Channel. And Hitler gave the order to stop. They would have been the unit that got to the English Channel. Then when they got into the war deeper, they went into the Eastern Front and they went to Moscow. And they saw the spires of the Kremlin and they were told to stop. So they were called the Almost Men because they never got where they were supposed to be. You know, they almost got there, but they never, you know, they were always stopped. And this was like a very big insult to these guys. They, you know, because they fought hard to get to the places they got to. I mean, they went through some heavy crap. If you read the history of the 2nd Panzer Division, there was some nasty boys, you know. I mean, and it was just, you know, they were so frustrated. When the bulge came, they were like, "We're charging," you know. And they got to the outskirts of Dinant. It's like a weird area. There's like intermittent hills and houses, you know. And they came into the town through this giant rock that's there. It stands like 150 feet tall. And it's split in half, and they have the road going through the middle of it. So the German column comes through this thing, and it's got like 2 tanks in the front, and then they have the fuel trucks. One has the ammo, the other has the fuel. So they're driving in this army police battalion is the guard at the bridge. The bridge is a pontoon bridge that's been erected next to the spot where the old bridge was. And to have like an MP platoon up in the college. And it just, everything came together. It all hit in this one night. The Squazzini commandos came screaming by. The tanks coming through the middle of the town. Just one guy steps out with a bazooka and fires a shot, and he misses the two tanks in the front and hits the ammo truck. It's the third vehicle in the convoy, and just causes this cataclysmic detonation in the small street that starts this giant fire and then sets the fuel truck off. So they have these two massive explosions right in the middle of the convoy. And the convoy splits up, and they had all kinds of tanks. Like it was like a conglomeration of, they have flame tigers and all kinds of, things like that. It's like late war. The Americans are not the second line, but it was an interesting thing to do. But because we have the Squazzini commandos sneaking in, they can enter anywhere on the other side of the river.
And those were the guys that were dressed up as American MPs. And I remember we were going back and forth with that one, Dan, for a while, trying to figure out the rules to make that work,
Yeah.
Because that was tough. How do you represent them?
They go past them. How do you get past them? They just drive through the checkpoints, or they, because we had this set up, the company was there. It was 5 British, 5 Allied tanks that come buzzing along. The Shermans with the big guns, right?
We had some Achilles in there, yeah, with the 76 double Ls, yeah.
Yeah, so it was like, it's an interesting night action. One of the things with Dinant, you have some weird times for the scenarios. You have partial sunlight, and the nights, we played a couple of night scenarios. There's 3 or 4 in there, I think.
3 anyway, yeah, 3.
Yeah.
And I like this little special rule with the if you have 2 machine guns in the sniper rule, they don't get to count the TEM. That's just to say, I haven't read the footnotes, but that's to say that they're going to target that spot, right? More often, give that historical. That seems, that could be in a lot of games, I think.
Yeah, I mean, the reason being, snipers are drawn to what's causing their side the most damage. When they're in the pure sniper role. I mean, snipers today, especially a little bit back then, but mostly today, they also call in artillery, they call in airstrikes. They have a much expanded role from the World War II sniper. But back then, it was the sniper himself trying to take things out with his rifle, more so than not. And you have something just shooting out this death ray from the 2nd floor of a building. You say, I think that needs to be stopped. And one of the reasons why, well, there's a number of reasons why people in actual World War II tactical manuals mention all the time, you don't lump all your machine guns together. For one thing, one lucky hit and there goes all your machine guns. For another, you want to cover more area, but also because it attracts a lot of unwanted attention. And part of that unwanted attention is snipers. So that doesn't really get represented in ASL. So we were talking, and that's the great thing about something like this. Like Dan and I would talk about the rules. Nadir would come in, we'd talk about the rules. Poor Nadir, he was kind of on his own hook because I'm more autistic than artistic, and Dan is not exactly renowned as an artist either. So we couldn't really help Nadir out too much, But
we could just make him do more stuff and try to figure out how to color this color. You try to.
Do you think you could? Oh God, poor guy.
Change that ruined city hex into a grain field.
Exactly. It's not too hard, right?
7 coats later,
sorry, we meant the field. Sorry.
Yeah, East Coasters.
But the whole idea behind that rule, though, with the snipers was it didn't represent how much attention something like that would draw from snipers. And the other part of it is a tactic that is used frequently. You have a 9-2 or a 9-1, a good leader directing that kill stack. He's in a building, usually 2nd level, maybe 1st level, highest level you can get to, for sure. And you always have a couple of half squads wearing construction vests and waving red flags out in the street saying, shoot me, Mr. Sniper, shoot me. I'm a 0 TM. Yeah. And that's, to put it mildly, an unrealistic tactic. And so that kind of says, you know, how can you defeat that tactic? Because it's going to get used in this. You got a lot of infantry. Some of it's just kind of cooling its heels, waiting to get on the other side while the boats are over there. They're just going to stand around smoking butts in the street and saying, you know, shoot me, sniper. So how can we avoid this problem? Well, I know. So unless you want to deploy a whole platoon around each individual strong point like that, you're going to have a 0 TM, just like the guys in the street. So it's going to be equidistant. Well, let's see. I can shoot the half squad that can't possibly harm me. Or I can shoot that monolithic Death Star and maybe kill the leader and break the whole thing. Well, that was easy, you know, and that kind of defeated that. So that was the idea behind that. Was it was both realistic but also defeated a gamey tactic.
Yeah, it's a wonderful way to tackle that.
Yeah.
Yeah. The there's burnt out woods. So historically, I guess were there woods burning, and then
What's interesting about that is, now this rule gets missed a lot, because and usually a clue to that is I'll pop in on a scenario and I'll see half the map on fire. Like, yeah, the first thing I'll ask is, by the way, in the SSR, you guys catch the -2 DRM for woods catching fire? Because and I actually was able to talk to Eddie Van Holten, little plug for Eddie there. He actually was a huge contributor to the Spanish Civil War module that we just gave to MMP, and he lived in Dinant. That's how I initially got to meet this guy. We were pretty much done with Dinant, and Perry said, "Hey, you want to talk to this Eddie Van Holten guy? He lives in Dinant." So I talked to him. Well, you know, Eddie, I mean, we're kind of done with this. I don't think there's much you can help us with on this at this point. But
he came
one thing I'm curious about, you know, and he said, yeah, they manicure the forest there. There's no underbrush to catch fire. It's very difficult for them to have they don't have big forest fires over there for this reason. And I said, because then Dan and I discussed it, and you know, because we had some play tests where just the whole place went on fire.
Oh, geez.
One by Paul Sadu, God, looked like, you know, well, let's fight on the part that's not burning. Oh, we have 2 hexes over here. Thank God we put a field in there, you know. So it was kind of
yeah, it was a problem that came up early. We found it early. That was we started getting reports of forest fires all over the world would come in.
Absolutely. Only you can prevent forest fires. So,
We're so used to seeing scenarios where kindling is NA.
it's not allowed.
You know, it's just
this wasn't even deliberate. This at the start when the battle started. Dornier strike came in, and it's a little pregame bombardment. You know, then I believe it's 3 or 4 hexes of a certain spot that's pre-registered by the Germans. But if you roll boxcars somewhere in there, you'll start a fire. Or if some OBA gets a KIA, you have a chance of starting a fire. And it can still happen, but with the -2, it kind of slows things down. Then you get to the refit phase. Well, again, no underbrush, so it's not going to keep going and going and going. It's going to be burnt out. And that also stops the spread of fire, because now you go from something that's burnable and on fire and spreading to something that now can't burn and can't spread. And also gives a more realistic battlefield, because you have all these charred remnants of trees. And so it controls the fires on the one hand, at least that's the plan. And on the other hand, it keeps it from carrying over quite as much scenario to scenario. Same thing with the buildings. They can become burnt out, gutted, that type of thing. And that is, again, the same general idea. So you just don't have these forever fires that just engulf the whole map.
But they can stay burning, though. That's the thing too. You don't know what's going to stay burning.
It could. Yep, some could stay built. They could go down into rubble. They could become gutted and stay standing. There's a couple of different things that can happen.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm a big terrain alteration guy. You know?
Well, I like a lot of
pyro in me. I can't help it.
Another thing we did too was we made it tougher to get star shells.
Yes.
That was big. We got rid of star shells being all over the map. You know, if you had a scenario with 30 squads on your side, and every one of them sticking their arm out of the house trying to shoot a star shell.
Yeah, it's Christmas time in May, exactly.
Okay.
The thing just split up too much.
So not really for historical reasons, just the fact that the way the rules worked, it was just too much.
Well, both actually. Because it's not, the whole place wasn't lit up like a Christmas tree historically. You'd have, somebody set up a star show. And there's been a couple of movies lately that kind of do a good job of that, even though they're World War One movies, 1917 and All Quiet on the Western Front, which was just redone recently. And a star show will go up and you have absolute darkness. And then for a little bit, you'll have all this illumination. And then it goes back to dark again. So there's plenty of time to move through and get where you're going without being illuminated. Whereas the ASL mechanics, the way they were, they just made it too easy to get star shows, in our opinion. So we said, no, you don't read accounts where the whole front is so illuminated that you can't budge. You might be unlucky and get caught while you're moving in the open, and you better go to ground fast, which is actually covered in the rules.
Like Gregory Peck in Pork Chop Hill.
Yeah.
He turned his flashlights on.
Yeah, don't do that. Light security is important. But that's the reason we did that. So it wasn't just this one mass of illuminated hexes. And oh, wait, I got the one hex corridor I could wriggle through. It was a little easier than that. Historically. So again, it had a historical basis.
And then looking at some of the terrain work here, Nadir, it's I love it. It's the narrow railroads around MM48, and you have the tennis court. Everyone knows I'm a giant fan of the tennis court. Just the way, and then the stable.
Yeah, the horse racing place. Yeah, I try to make it as accurate as I can. Like I said, for that's what you want the player to experience. And all it takes is something to be wrong, and somebody's going to go, oh well, the whole thing must be wrong if they got this one thing wrong. I'm tired of hearing that kind of thing. So we tried as hard as we could.
But as you're going through playtesting and stuff, Nadir, do you get recommendations to change things on the map? Like if line of sight isn't right or something, do you have to go in and adjust? I mean, you make it sound like you did the map and then you're all done and you hand it off.
No.
There's
changes the night before it was published.
Really? Constant tweaking.
Yeah, from the perspective of, should there be a street here or a building there, that was all pretty established before playtesting, right? Because that's what they would then playtest. But there were tweaks. I'd actually have to go back and look through emails to see what those might have been toward the end. But it wasn't anything significant.
It was amazing, though. He would send us emails. Nadir would send us emails. And it'd be like, well, what do you guys think about building hex, I don't know, P45? And like P45. So expecting to see something in the thick of the fighting, but it's so detail oriented. He was actually picking a building that was a little away from it and saying, gee, did I get that right? And he'd have pictures of it. What do you think? Level 1.5, level 2.5. What do you think? Yeah. And I'd just be absolutely amazed, like, Nadir, where did you find this stuff? And it was really fascinating to watch. Just an incredible job the man did.
So that's the fun of doing the research.
I think he said he had a background in architecture, and you can see it because he got into doing this city up from the air. It looks spectacular.
I'd move into a house that Nadir built. Yeah, I don't have any problem with that.
He just the way he did it, and he depicted it like the different roofs, because the thing over there, people, they don't put their roofs up the same. Here in the United States, you're used to people, like, you go into a neighborhood and everybody's got the same roof.
Right.
These people don't have the same roof. There's not one roof that's the same as another one over there, and it's like he got that, he, especially up in the little town on the hill there. What's the name of that? Saint Medard.
Yes.
In there, like the houses in there, I think he painted like 2 houses that were a little brown on the roof that had people like gagging air out of in the first. It was like, what's that? Is that a different kind of wood?
Yeah, it's plus 2.5.
Yeah. We're glad you noticed that.
No, if you want to see an example of what they now had to do is in a northern re-entrant, if you can look at it. I don't know whether you have. Can you look at the whole map there?
No, I don't have it in my computer.
Okay, but in the north re-entrant, there's a church right at the opening to it that we had to put up on railroad ties. that held the earth back. When we went over there, I saw it as we drove up the road that this thing was held up. There was a church, and now I got a picture late in the thing of the view from behind this church, and you can see how dominating the steeple was.
Yeah.
So it was really like right up until I think the night before we gave the MMP to publish it. Like it was like a week after that the thing came out. He was making changes on it right up until then.
Yeah, and Nadir was the one you caught the weir there too, where that went across the river. There was this little weir. I might be mispronouncing it. It might be weir. It might
That's
be
weird.
Yeah, and basically it's a little spot where the water runs only 3 feet deep. There's this narrow little channel that you can walk across, almost like a little channel lock. And Nadir caught that. I said, okay. And he was saying, well, you might want to write some rules about this because I said, no, you're right. You're absolutely right. And all three of us got together. What do you think, guys? One squad across at a time. Sounds like a pretty dangerous task. And it should be has this movement. Yeah, it has this movement, And that's the cool thing about doing stuff like this. It's always such a nice collaborative effort. And that wouldn't have even been on the map had Nadir not caught it.
Yeah, it turns out that's actually something they do to make the Rhine River, or that river, navigable, the Meuse rather, not the Rhine, to keep it navigable longer in the year. They have those dams so that they hold water further upstream. And there's a series of those down the river, and that's why you have the lock on one side and essentially what amounts to a waterfall on the other. The Germans did actually try to cross on that. One of their early crossings was that it was bloody, and so the rules reflect that.
Well, what they did was they came running out onto the weir, carrying a raft, and like 10 guys tried to jump into it, doing like the Three Stooges imitation. Didn't end well, but they got like half of them across. And they were the guys that, Rommel the next day said, set the place on fire and climb the cliffs.
Well, they gave us a nice SSR anyway. It was considerate of them.
Yeah. Carl got to write some rules, man. I'll tell you. It was like
Well, that's a great interview we got going, but we're going to have to do it in 2 parts, Jeff.
Yeah, a lot of information there. So, but before we go, we just want to reach out and send a special message to Chris Trout, one of our ASL aficionado friends, acquaintances through the grapevine. We heard Chris is not feeling well.
Yep. So our condolences and best wishes to you, our friend. And
yes, and prayers.
We will keep you in our thoughts and prayers. So
we will indeed, and we'll keep rolling for you to rally well.
We will.
Hope you're doing okay, Chris, and we're thinking about you.
And several other ASLers who are struggling as we all get a little older, Jeff.
Yeah.
So you may notice Jeff's in the car if you're watching on.
Yes. I'm no longer in. This is not a backdrop. This is my actual Jeep Wrangler.
And I am bagging up my ASL counters I sold on eBay and sending them out. So until next time, everybody, we will.
You are busy. Yeah. Roll low.
And rally well.
But not when you're playing us.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.